Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's Young here and welcome to a Metal Gear Solid 5 gameplay analysis. Today I'll be analyzing the TGS 2013 Special Ops demo, which showed off Ground Zeroes in broad daylight. There have been rumors going around that Ground Zeroes would not feature a day and night cycle, but it's pretty obvious that is not the case. Now before you proceed, be sure to watch the analysis of the nighttime demo, since I won't be reiterating on gameplay mechanics that I've already talked about. Anyways, I'm very excited to break down this footage and squeeze every bit of information out of it. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. Before I begin, I would like to thank two YouTube users who have messaged me translations of important information that Hideo Kojima and company shared with the audience in Japan. Those users are Shohei683 and Pokemon Smosh. Without them, I would have missed tons of information, so a huge thanks to them. Anyways, right off the bat, we are shown a rather intriguing main menu. While it could be a menu specifically modified for TGS 2013, my theory, based on what I'm seeing here, is that the game will seamlessly transition from title screen to gameplay. Maybe what shows up on the title screen changes, depending on the player's last save or checkpoint. For example, if players save and quit the game inside Mother Base, maybe next time players boot up the game, they'll be taken directly to Mother Base, or in this case, perhaps the player saved and exited the game inside the chopper, which is why the game booted up here. The same could be said in the middle of a mission. If Snake finds a safe spot to save the game, or if it features some kind of a checkpoint system, maybe next time players boot up the game, Snake will be smoking a cigar or something in a safe location inside Camp Omega, or whatever his last location was. In other words, some kind of seamless transition between title screen and game. Maybe I'm just drawing at straws here, but every transition I've seen thus far have been seamless, from cutscene to gameplay, and even from gameplay to menu. So who's to say that the title screen won't transition right into gameplay? But again, this is just my theory, and the bottom line is that what we are shown here doesn't 100% represent the final product. Next, I want to talk about the mission selection interface. My first impression was that this menu was specifically created for TGS 2013, but then I noticed all these top secret mission files, which got me thinking, if this is a custom menu for TGS, why not just have the two demos that they're going to show, rather than blurring out the ones they want to keep a secret? The only reason I can think of is that as of now, this is what the mission selection actually looks like. To save time, instead of creating an entire interface for this one event, they decided to use what they already had, add some stuff here and there, and blur out the stuff they didn't want to show. As for how players will get to use this mission selection menu in the final product, here's what I'm thinking. Mother Base, or Diamond Dogs in the future, will act as a main hub that Snake can physically roam around in. When players decide to do a mission, they can guide Snake to a chopper somewhere on the exterior of Mother Base, which will transition into Snake boarding the chopper, leading into the mission selection menu we are looking at right now. In short, Mother Base, or Diamond Dogs, will act as the main hub from which players can customize their loadout and upgrade their base, items, weapons, vehicles, and tools, while choppers will act as the bridge between Snake, the main hub, and missions. And yes, folks, I am pretty damn sure that the game will actually feature a mission selection menu similar to Peace Walker. Why, you ask? In a recent interview with Game Informer, Hideo Kojima hinted at main missions and side missions featuring challenges for the hardcore, stuff like complete the mission with no kills or no alerts or within a certain amount of time. Any game that features challenges within missions is guaranteed to allow players to replay missions, and the only way to replay missions is through a mission selection menu. And since the game features a mission selection menu, it would also make sense for the game to utilize Peace Walker's loadout feature. And in fact, you will see throughout the entire demo that the game brings back tons of elements from Peace Walker, and I am confident that mission selection and loadout are among them. Alright, enough about the menu, let's dive into the actual mission, which is simply labeled as TGS 2013 Special Mission, with the same MSF logo and font from Peace Walker. It's essentially a custom side ops for TGS, and speaking of side ops, according to Hideo Kojima, there will be plenty of them when the game launches. Anyways, we are finally in-game, and most interesting about the intro scene is Snake's insertion method. In the nighttime demo, Snake comes in from the far end of the island after climbing a cliff. In this mission, he takes advantage of one of the guard's vehicles, which reminds me of how in Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake could hide himself under a cardboard box behind a truck filled with boxes to get around Groznygrad. I can't say if entry locations are predetermined for specific missions or if players get to choose, but since the game is open world, I would hope for the latter. It's highly likely that this particular entry method was scripted specifically for this TGS demo. It's also possible that entry locations are only predetermined for Ground Zeroes, but not for Phantom Pain, since Kojima has stated multiple times that the Phantom Pain portion is when the game really opens up. We'll see. So what is the mission? According to Hideo Kojima and the iDroid device, the objective is to find an undercover agent working for Mother Base who has been sent as a mole to find and retrieve a certain Sony cassette tape. Kojima refers to him as Brian since the agent's face is a 3D scanned version of Kojima Productions studio animator Brian. This is very similar to the inclusion of a soldier modeled after Metal Gear Solid 5's music composer Ludwig Forsell, and Hideo Kojima himself has been spotted doing some motion capture and voiceover, so I would expect a significant amount of staff members to be included in the game. Anyways, back to gameplay. It's up to the player to decide when to get off the truck. Kojima does warn, however, that staying in the car too long may result in Snake finding himself in a heavily patrolled area, which could complicate the mission quite a bit, especially in broad daylight. Tackling a mission during the day may make it more difficult to sneak around, but the player uses the visibility to his advantage by scouting and tagging enemies, which are crucial to the success of these open-world missions. Now, there's a rumor going around that targets can only be tagged through binoculars. While binoculars are necessary to tag distant targets, it's important to note that binoculars are not required to tag enemies in close proximity and in good view, as you can see here. As Snake continues to hide on the truck, we get to see a sign that says, "Keep out, no contact with refugees without permission of facility commander." There's also a Spanish version below, which reads, "Manténgase alejado, prohibido el contacto con refugiados sin permiso del comandante de la facilidad," or something along those lines. The text is a bit too blurry. After more scouting and tagging, we get to see a sign that says, "Items below are prohibited in refugee facilities," along with a list of said items. Can't really make out the text though. Soon after, the player finally decides to get off the truck, and smartly does so under a bridge where he can't be spotted. He then pulls out the iDroid, which shows tagged targets thus far, along with white dots that show the route that the player has taken. This fading trail of dots should ensure that players don't accidentally head back to where they came from, which embarrassingly is something that I do quite often. At the bottom of the map are button prompts for toggling between the iDroid map's various settings, all which I have explained before in the nighttime demo analysis, so let's move on. The player's first move is to take out the guard on the tower, who has the most visibility of the facility. To do so, he brings up the inventory wheel to evaluate his options. The weapon assigned to the up D-pad is a suppressed MRS-4 rifle. The item assigned to the right D-pad is the familiar magazine item, used for distracting or baiting guards. The item assigned to the down D-pad is the WV silent pistol, a tranquilizer gun with a built-in suppressor. The player goes for the tranquilizer, and as he takes aim, you may notice a rather interesting crosshair with 3 horizontal lines at the bottom. These kinds of crosshairs are known as ballistic rectiles, and each horizontal line can be used to aim at different target distances. The reason that the tranquilizer gun features such a crosshair is because the tranquilizer darts in this game will travel in a trajectory, a fact confirmed by Hideo Kojima himself in his commentary during the demo. He says that using the gun might look easy, but it's not, because the course of the bullet will change when using the tranquilizer. The gun features something known as the effective weapon range. When the gun is aimed at a target that is close enough, or within the effective weapon range, the crosshair will actually change to red to indicate that the tranquilizer darts will hit the target. But when targets are outside of this range, the cursor will not change color, forcing the player to take aim a little higher and estimate the dart's trajectory. In other words, landing a headshot with this gun will prove to be significantly more difficult in this game, especially on distant targets. I think this is great, since in my opinion, tranquilizer guns in past games were far too accurate and overpowered, but now Now, with the addition of this risk, the tranquilizer gun will likely end up being more intense, yet more rewarding to use. This player manages to successfully neutralize the target, and then makes his way into the sunlit Camp Omega, where he finds the undercover agent. Once Snake gets a closer look at the target, a marker appears above his head to confirm his identity. Kaz's dialogue states that this character was specifically planted for TGS, so there is a chance that we may not see him in the final game. The player proceeds by using CQC to grab the agent. Why does he use force against an ally? That's because if the two are spotted having a friendly chatter, the agent's undercover status will be compromised, so Snake is forced to treat him like an enemy. The player proceeds to use the interrogation option, leading into a conversation about the whereabouts of this cassette tape. The agent first says something along the lines of, "So you're the one who they sent. Would you loosen my neck so I can talk?" Then he proceeds by saying that the cassette isn't with him since he's being watched, which is why he hid the cassette in a safe spot. And then he says something interesting. He says something like, "That person is not CIA. That person is... Nothing, never mind, you be careful." Could he be referring to Skullface? Who he was talking about wasn't clarified, unfortunately, so your guess is as good as mine. Anyways, the agent informs Snake of the cassette's location, and then tells Snake, "Come on, do it fast." And by do it fast, he means knock me unconscious quickly and painlessly. Again, the undercover agent wants to remain undercover, which is why he asks Snake to render him unconscious. An instant later, a new marker appears indicating the location of the hidden cassette tape. The marker can also be found on Snake's iDroid map. Using the map, the player can also set a custom waypoint by dragging the map around and pressing the X button, or the A button for Xbox players. The mission marker is indicated by a square waypoint, while the player's custom marker is indicated by a circular waypoint. Anytime a marker is placed, a robotic female voice will say, "Marker placed." As for who voices the iDroid, Hideo Kojima confirmed that Donna Burke, the singer of Sins of the Father, will be doing the voiceover for the device. Another feature of the iDroid map is that it updates based on information players obtain from interrogations. Hideo Kojima's example was that when interrogating an enemy for information, he may give away the whereabouts of a weapon stash in the area, and the iDroid will automatically mark the location on the map. It's quite the handy tool. Anyways, after placing a player marker on top of the mission marker for whatever reason, the player heads towards it. On his way to the objective, after tagging a few more soldiers, the player shows off one of Snake's many CQC moves. As I mentioned in my previous video, anytime players can perform anything CQC related, a button prompt will appear alongside Peace Walker's CQC symbol, which flashes in a similar way after CQC is successfully performed. We then get to witness yet another returning feature from Peace Walker, the ability to perform CQC combos, and like in Peace Walker, Snake has multiple CQC animations that he uses to keep the battle visually varied. I am so glad that this feature makes a return. CQC is supposed to be a basic yet powerful combat style that can take down multiple enemies at once, and we see that constantly in cutscenes, but never in-game until Peace Walker introduced this feature, so to see it come back makes my Snake solid. Okay, too much information. After successfully neutralizing the guards, the player heads into the watchtower and successfully retrieves the Sony cassette tape that Snake was sent to get. In the process, we are shown another one of many weapons found throughout the game. This one is the M2000 Sniper D, a standard weapon for any watchtower guard in Camp Omega. Now, despite having completed the objective, the mission isn't over until Snake is extracted, so the player brings up the iDroid once again, this time to choose an extraction point for the evac chopper. But before he does that, notice the exclamation mark next to the cassette player. The symbol appeared after the player collected the Sony cassette, so it's safe to assume that the exclamation mark indicates that there's a new soundtrack or audio file available for players to listen to. This got me thinking, maybe the game will feature in-game audio logs for the first time, similar to games like BioShock. It wouldn't be far-fetched to assume that players can find audio logs in Sony cassette tapes scattered across the game world to get a deeper insight of the story. That'd be kinda cool if you ask me. Anyways, the player goes into the helicopter option to choose between distant yet safe white extraction points or nearby yet dangerous orange extraction points, and while this is happening, Kaz is warning Snake that he can only call one chopper. Hideo Kojima confirmed this as well, saying that if the chopper gets taken down, players will have to find ways to exit Camp Omega by land, a method shown in this demo. In the Phantom Pain portion of the game, however, base management will really open up for the player, allowing them to not only develop weapons and the like, but also to buy choppers and upgrade them with things like miniguns. So in the Phantom Pain, if players can afford it, if one evac chopper goes down, another one can be brought in if available. In this demo, the player purposely decides to call the evac chopper into one of the more dangerous extraction points, and after doing so, decides to purposely get detected by a guard to show off some action. And if you were listening closely, you may have heard the classic Metal Gear Solid alert sound playing in the background. Knowing that the game will feature both exclamation marks and the alert sound makes me one happy Metal Gear fan. Anyways, after the player gets himself detected, he proceeds to show off some awesome CQC combat. I've always hated how lame combat looked in past games compared to cutscenes, so seeing this had me squealing with joy. This is what CQC is supposed to be. Basic, yet fast, ferocious, and ultimately cool. I am glad that Kojima and his team are finally taking the time to make CQC look and feel more sophisticated. The player then proceeds to pick up the dropped sniper rifle to defend himself. Notice that in this game, when Snake picks up a weapon, it physically manifests itself rather than going into some magical pocket. In fact, any items or weapons that Snake carries during a mission can be seen physically equipped on Snake, which greatly adds to immersion and realism. This is also another reason why I am sure that Metal Gear Solid 5 will feature a loadout system. There are only so many weapons that Snake can physically carry at one time before he starts looking a bit ridiculous. After picking up the sniper rifle, Snake shows off just how much more agile he is in this game. Not only are Snake's movements faster and more fluid, but also more versatile, allowing him to climb and overcome taller and more types of obstacles. Taking advantage of this, the player climbs on top of the structure and shows off a more flexible Snake. Rather than turning like a rigid plank in prone position, Snake actually leans, twists, and turns his body to shoot around him, which not only looks more realistic, but also makes shooting in prone position a lot more viable. Having a good view of incoming targets, the player finally takes out his sniper rifle and shows off some sharp shooting, while smartly using explosive canisters to his advantage. During this sequence, you may also notice a threat ring every time Snake takes damage, a prominent feature in a lot of first-person shooters. Being an open-world game, it's important for the player to get indication of where shots are being fired from. After some more sniping, the player finally spots the evac chopper he called in and decides to make a run for it, switching to his MRS-4 rifle to better defend himself against distant targets. Enemies at arm's distance, on the other hand, are dealt with some awesome CQC. We can see Snake performing his classic knockout move on this one guard, while performing his new disarming CQC technique on another, a technique we first saw in the E3 trailer. Interesting to note is that after Snake steals the guard's weapon, he is physically wielding a total of 4 weapons. His WV tranquilizer gun is holstered on his right hip, the MRS-4 rifle resides on his left hip, the M2000 sniper rifle lies on his back, and the soldier's AM rifle Type 69 is drawn and ready to fire. The way I see it, Snake can holster up to 3 firearms at a time and arm himself with a 4th, which he has no choice but to drop after use when all 3 holsters are occupied. As for the shooting mechanics, it's quite similar to Metal Gear Solid 4, but I do get the feeling that bullets are more impactful and deal more realistic damage, meaning enemies seem to die with less shots. Before you go around thinking this will make the game easier, the game makes up for this not only in sheer quantity of soldiers in one open world area, but also by making improvements to the AI. These guys actually take strategic cover and make attempts to flank Snake and catch him off guard. One guard even falls back, realizing that he wasn't in the best position. So despite the fact that enemies take less to kill, the advanced AI and the number of soldiers were enough to give the player a lot of trouble during the demo. At some point, Snake ends up losing a ton of health, resulting in the screen being smudged by what's been confirmed to be a degrading or burning film effect. And when Snake's health is critically low, colors begin to fade into an auburn tint, similar to that of a film strip. Fortunately for this player, the game features a regenerating health system, confirmed by Kojima himself during his commentary. I know some people out there are upset about regenerating health, but the good news is that Snake can only regenerate health when he's idle. In most first-person shooters, players regenerate health no matter what, as long as they are out of harm's way, but in this game, Snake will not heal himself if he moves around, so just because the health bar is gone does not necessarily mean the game will be a cakewalk. After a long shootout, the player finally manages to take out the guards nearby, giving him a clear pathway towards the evac chopper. Unfortunately, Snake's detection caused a significant increase in security, resulting in the chopper being taken down by manned anti-aircraft guns. Moments later, Kaz informed Snake through codec that he'll have to get out by land. At this point, the player has no choice but to hold his own, during which we are shown more of the advanced enemy AI. They now even do impressive maneuvers like sliding into cover. The player is soon overwhelmed and nearly faces death, but manages to make it out alive since the game was running on the lowest difficulty. In the process, we are also shown a returning mobility feature from Metal Gear Solid 4, the ability to roll on the ground. I would also like to point out one more time how Snake tilts, leans, twists, and turns his body around when looking and shooting while prone, rather than unrealistically spinning his entire body like a compass needle. After the player pulls himself together, he brings up a submenu of the inventory wheel. This submenu allows players to switch items and weapons in and out from one of each D-pad button. In this case, the player replaces the magazine assigned to the right D-pad with a hand grenade. Interesting to note about this submenu is that it provides descriptions of selected items or weapons, unlike the main inventory wheel. Through the submenu, we are also shown two new items, the C4 and the flare grenade. I don't think I have to explain the C4, but some of you may be wondering what flare grenades are for. According to Hideo Kojima, extraction points can be set by either using the designated areas from the iDroid or by using a flare grenade. Kojima says that the iDroid is the quickest way to do it, but if players have a more specific extraction point in mind, they can use the flare grenade to designate their own landing point for the evac chopper. That's pretty cool. The player goes for the hand grenade, making pretty damn good use of it, and I've gotta say, loving all the exclamation marks I'm seeing here. Surprisingly, one of the soldiers survives, but the player manages to take him out. From here on out, it's just all-out chaos and mayhem, and even tanks and vehicles start getting in on the action, all which can be hijacked by the player. Outnumbered, the player has no choice but to make his escape. Before we get into that though, I would like to direct your attention to this dumpster. Players could hide in these in Metal Gear Solid 4, so I would expect players to be able to do the same thing in Metal Gear Solid 5. These should help avoid soldiers and maybe even get out of the alert phase once detected. Anyways, amidst the chaos, the player shows off another one of Snake's new abilities, the ability to sprint. He sprints a lot during the previous firefight, but we can get a better view of the feature here. As you can see, the man can tear ass. He sprints a little too fast for my taste, making escapes a bit too easy. But then again, it is a giant open world, so perhaps that balances things out. After making it to the edge of the island, the player brings up the weapon wheel one more time to equip the C4. Notice how he cycles between weapons without bringing up the submenu. This is likely done by continuously pressing a specific direction of the D-pad. It seems as though each direction of the D-pad holds up to 4 items. I can't say if each slot is fully customizable, or if certain directions in the D-pad are reserved for specific types of weapons. Maybe the up D-pad is reserved for primary weapons, the down D-pad for secondary weapons or sidearms, and the right D-pad for throwable objects like magazines and grenades. But then again, it's also possible that the player customized it this way. We'll have to wait and see. What I am sure of is that this D-pad wheel is likely customized through some kind of a loadout menu back at Mother Base outside of missions. Anyways, the C4 is set, which leads into this badass bit of footage. After taking care of that, the player decides to steal one of their vehicles, which makes for a very effective method of escape, especially since enemies can be run over GTA style. During the ride, some guards retaliate with RPGs, which is now another one of many confirmed weapons. A few shadow pop-ins later, the player finally succeeds in making it out of Camp Omega alive, completing the mission with pizzazz. And like with the nighttime mission, the demo ends with dialogue from Kaz, which basically translates to this.
こっちはお勧めできません。絶対死ぬと思う。なるほど。
機密情報の内容は本編に期待しよう。
はい。
ありがとう。Thank you.
先ほどの
And with that, I would like to conclude my trailer analysis for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to let our nation know in the comments below your opinions and theories, and also let me know if I made any mistakes or missed anything. And once again, I would like to thank the two translators for making this video possible. To be further updated on Metal Gear Solid 5, be sure to join the nation and subscribe to Young Gear. I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much, and Young out!